Shane, welcome to the podcast again. I'm very glad to have you here today. It's Monday. You already said it's a very, very busy day for you. So we'll try to not to prolong it too long. And because I know that there are some topics we'd like to talk about a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm
Yeah.
excited to do this. But don't worry about it. Mondays are always going to be hectic, and any other day of the week, as you'll find, is always going to be hectic in its own way. So you carve out time for the things you like enjoy doing, you know?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Maybe you can tell again about your story first. How did you start? Where did it all start, actually? Tell me
Yeah,
about
sure.
yourself.
My name is Shane Skwarek. I'm the owner and chief technologist of SFX.com Small Business Solutions. For me, that actually started back in 2007. I was a high school student coming out of high school, doing some websites here and there. And as I was going through college, I wanted to kind of legitimize that a little bit more. So my father, I graduated in 2003, so there was a gap within there. My father sort of twisted my arm a little bit into actually opening a formalized business because I had some income coming in. He said, at some point, Uncle Sam's going to start knocking at your door asking you where this money's coming from. So you got to kind of formalize it a little bit. In college, I tried the whole thing of getting another job while I was going away to school, and it really wasn't working too well. It's hard to kind of juggle those schedules around, and the jobs are few and far between that'll actually work with your schedule there. So I was already building websites at a low rate, and I just sort of started picking it up a little bit. It became awesome because it became super flexible for me too. I was able to just sort of navigate around my college schedule with building these sites.
Hmm.
That sort of just kept growing and growing until as I graduated college. That was sort of towards the end of my final year. And as I graduated, it just got to a point where um, I was able to do it a little more frequently. I ended up getting a full-time job working in New York City right out of college. I was fortunate in that regard. Doing kind of the same basic thing, director of technology, as what the role would eventually materialize into. But I had a really long commute on the train. It was about 2.5 hours each way. And
Hmm.
so in the mornings, I'm not going to lie, I probably did a lot more sleeping than I did working, just trying to make up for those
Yeah.
lost hours. But on the way home, I was all wired. It was probably 4 or 5 o'clock. And I just always would pull up my laptop, throw it literally on my lap, and try to
Hmm.
create more websites that way. So that kind of continued that journey for me, going from high school doing it sort of for fun on the side, college doing it because I really just didn't want to get a different job and stress my schedule out, and then just looking for extra cash on that commute
Hmm.
until ultimately, making that jump and committing to doing this full time.
Hmm. Was it just an extra cash that you were looking for when you started this business?
I think it was a combination. I mean, the cash at that time in the
Hmm.
beginning was not a lot. I mean, perhaps for a guy that just graduated college and was eating ramen noodle soup and hot dogs every day for dinner because I couldn't afford much else. Having a little extra money was nice, but I was
Hmm.
building websites, which was the core of my business then, for peanuts, more or less.
Yeah.
It was really low priced websites at the time. I felt really confident in that, and those prices were really great. But I realized that this wasn't sustainable. I couldn't grow a business at this rate, and at some point, I have to get the
Hmm.
confidence to build it up. So I think with that in mind, it also became a way to sort of build out a portfolio a little bit. I was definitely a little nervous, and I had no inclination of going out to do my own business. For me, it was always a side hustle at that point. I didn't have that level of confidence to say, I can do enough of these websites to really make it and make it a career. And more importantly, probably go back and tell my parents that I'm quitting a full-time job with the guaranteed salary to make,
Yeah.
simple little websites for small businesses. So yeah, there was some passion involved in that. It wasn't just all about the money, but having extra cash is always nice.
That's true. So there was this intrinsic element to it too. But you said you never saw it in the beginning as an individual business, but rather than side hustle. When did it change?
It's a great question. I don't know that I have an exact pinpoint of that moment that the business itself changed,
Hmm.
because right up until the day that I actually put in my resignation for my full-time job, I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. I had
Hmm.
known that the commute was wearing on me. I had worked in the city for probably about 5 years at that point. This brings us closer to about 2012 is when I committed to this full time. I had enough business to again, keep me occupied. I was coming home every night. I was working on websites or different projects, different programs. I was spending my weekends. I was a single guy in
Mm-hmm.
my early 20s. I was either going out to bars at night or I was waking up and building websites and coding all day long. So I had enough traction that I felt comfortable with the extra income and I was doing all right. It's just the commute just started to really hammer me down 5 hours a day. It's
Mm-hmm.
exhausting for a while. And so I decided I wanted to try to find something a little closer to home.
Yeah.
Figured that, I can build my business along the side as
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding something that's a little more closer to home. It'll open up some more hours for me. I had some I don't want to say repetitive customers, but I'd say longer term customers that they were starting to use me for management of their site. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just building and deploying, which is what my model was at the time. I'd gotten to the point where I hired my first freelancer to kind of help me build the coding of the site so I can
Yeah.
focus on like the business aspects. Again, time was a factor in it too, but we were able to tag team some products and grow. So I was unknowingly building the foundations of what would become my business.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to that point ultimately just became when I was interviewing for jobs. At this point, I had again 5 years under my belt. I had jumped into my role in Manhattan, supposed to just be a junior level web designer. And when I interviewed for that role, the person that was supposed to be my superior had resigned
Mm-hmm.
within weeks of me actually joining the company. So they sort of said,
Yeah.
"Listen, we're going to thrust all this responsibility on you. If you can't handle it, it's fine. But let's just see what you got. Rather than
Yeah.
trying to bring somebody else in there, we want to give you that opportunity." And I thrived pretty well in that role. So by the time I left the company, I was labeled as the director of technology. So as I'm going around and now I'm applying to other jobs, I'm getting minimum wage offers with this experience working in Manhattan on Wall Street, which
Mm-hmm.
it sounds more prestigious than my company probably was uh,
Yeah.
affording at the time. But I've got this role as director of technology. I've got all this experience. I'm running a business technically on the side, and I'm getting literally minimum wage offers. I'm like, oh, this is absurd. Like I understood that I would be taking a pay cut leaving New York City. I didn't realize that the pay cut would be like starting me back from nothing again from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
That time minimum wage in New Jersey was about $7 an hour. So college degree, my loans were never getting paid off with that amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
There really wasn't a lot of the jobs that were kind of a little more local to me didn't really afford themselves for growth. You weren't joining a web development company. That didn't really exist in my area at that time. You were
Mm-hmm.
joining another company as their web developer. And so there wasn't a lot of value put on that position. And so that's when it kind of came to me that like I have to sort of decide what I want to do here is I got to move up towards New York City and I got to commit to my job. And I've got to really push the envelope. And there were some opportunities that were about to hit my desk for growth that I could have done that and I would have been fine. Again, moving closer up to New York would have added on extra costs and living,
Mm-hmm.
commuting, and all that other stuff. So probably would have balanced out in the scheme of things. Or I had to kind of figure out what my next step was. The job market here was bland. So what's the next option? Is doing enough of this website stuff to make it by. Can I do it and maybe just struggle a little bit with the cash and just sort of like really pinch pennies? I mean, I was eating more than ramen noodle soup at the time, so it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
My cousin always jokes that I used to go to like the supermarket and they had these Nor's rice packs and they were $1 a clip. And when they were on sale, they were 50 cents. And that was a meal. A whole meal for me was one of those little
Yeah.
rice packs. So she always used to joke. I used to cut whenever I'd see you, you'd have just like boxes of like rice, ramen noodles, and
Yeah.
hot dogs because that's what I was eating in college. So I was like, I've done that before. I was out of that phase at this point because I was making decent enough money
Mm-hmm.
in New York City. But I'm like, all right, well, I can go back to that. Get I'm in my early 20s. I don't really care, probably mid 20s by then.
Yeah.
Don't care what I eat. My metabolism wasn't quite catching up to
Mm-hmm.
where I had to hit the gym as much as I probably need to these days. But yeah, it's just that's when I sort of decided, you know what, like I'm gonna try to better myself. What's the worst that can happen? I have to
Mm-hmm.
get a job. So um, I think it sort of crept into my mind a little bit. It wasn't just sort of all at once.
Fascinating. Was it difficult for you in the end to take this jump? Or how long did it take for you to take like this jump from doing this as a side hustle to doing as an individual business?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people when they dive into business you always sort of see the success stories, right? Like, oh, they're
Mm-hmm.
doing really well right now, and you're an overnight success. And that, I think, in every facet, and very rarely is that true. I think in every facet, that's usually the opposite. Is if you want to get technical, in 2003, 2002, while I was a junior, senior in high school, that's when I was starting to make websites for money. So that was sort of dipping my toes in the water. In 2012 is when I took the leap to actually start my own business. And it took me, I tell this story all the time, and it holds so true to. I'm not exaggerating when I say I went into my office every single day for 6 months. And I said to myself, when I trade right in, today is the day I'm going to resign. Because I had convinced myself now, like, I just couldn't bear with the commute anymore. It was just killing me. I was so exhausted at this point. And like, you never really had a chance to catch up because I'm trying to build my business on the side and build up this level of comfort. So I felt ready to jump.
Mm-hmm.
Which any entrepreneur, especially if you're considering to become an entrepreneur, that's one of those big hurdles that you have to always have to face is like, I just want to get enough to feel comfortable to make that jump. And so for me, it was literally 6 straight months. And I remember reading a book called The 4 Hour Work Week by Timothy Ferriss.
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of the trigger for me to want to do this. But again, I had to get the courage to do it. It wasn't until, and I swear on everything that it was this exact same day. It wasn't just like my mind. I went in that day and I went up to my boss's office and I said, his name's Tom. I'm like, Tom, I got to have a conversation with you. It was the first thing when I got in. I'm like, do you have, let me know when you have a few minutes. I just want to come sit down with you privately and talk to you about a few things. Like, absolutely. I just want to hold a really quick staff meeting first. It's like, all right, sure. He's like, as soon as we're done, we'll go ahead and we'll have this conversation. He calls the staff together. We go in the conference room. Tom comes out and says, everybody, I just want to let you know I am retiring and I'm going to be phasing myself out. And now I'm sitting there and I loved him. He was an awesome boss, a great mentor. My whole tenure with him, he taught me, when you're creating these roles in the organization, taught me how to improve my resume, taught me things that I
Mm-hmm.
adding to it, tweaked my job titles so I sounded better on paper. He's like, you're not going to be here forever. He's like, I want to make sure that I'm leaving you in a better place that you came here with. Which is
Mm-hmm.
incredible. The opportunities for me, I could never thank him enough for that. But now I'm sitting there thinking like, all right, well, I'm losing a mentor, but at the same token, like, dude, like you just took my thunder. Like today was my day. Like I know I'm leaving. Not you. You can't leave. It also scared me too because I felt with him in charge,
Mm-hmm.
afford me an easier transition on my
Yeah.
way out. And he would understand because he knew what my commute was. He knew what I was doing stuff on the side. He would understand too, like if this really failed for me and in 6 or 12 months, I was like, I can't make it happen. I might be able to convince him to give me my job.
Mm-hmm.
He's there. In any case, I go into his office a little bit afterwards and I explained to him, like, listen, like I came in here today with the intention of telling you that I'd like to resign. And so, he sat down and talked to me about it. And he was like super supportive, as he always seemed to be. And in that support, he had basically factored out, like, I want you to come up with a number that you think that you want to be charging an hour. He's like, I want to phase you out over a period of time. And I want to
Mm-hmm.
retain you as, a vendor for this association. So I did that. I came up with a number. I basically took my salary. I broke it down really small into like how many hours a week I would work and what that hourly wage would end up effectively being. I brought him that number and he doubled that number. He's like, okay, when I call, I want you to answer. I was like, oh my God. Like it blew me away because it was like so much confidence in me. But he also knew that like, you're not going to be putting in 40 hours a week working for us. You're probably going to be putting in a fraction of that.
Yeah.
He at least set me off on the right path where I had a new client that might not have been there forever. But at least for the first few months of me getting going,
Mm-hmm.
I would have enough money coming into me where I can figure out the rest. It was not easy. And I remember even the last day I was in the office, I phased out. I was only working 4 out of the 5 days. I was working one remote at that point. And so over the next, like, I think 6 weeks, 5 weeks, it went from, 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, and then eventually to none. And I would come in periodically, like maybe once a month, once every other month after,
Mm-hmm.
just to, keep things flowing and help to train other members of the staff on some of my day-to-day stuff. But even that, like in that last day that I was in there, one day a week, it was a little scary knowing that like when I'm going home, this is it. Like now it's on me. And now, you
Mm-hmm.
really gotta make sure that you're making the right decision here. So
Yeah. Crazy. How did it feel in that moment?
um I mean, mortifying, obviously. I was at a situation in my life where I didn't have a mortgage and I didn't have a family. So I didn't have any sort of major financial
Mm-hmm.
responsibilities. Car payment, my student loans were probably about kicking in right around that point. I had bills, but most of my bills
Mm-hmm.
were again my nightlife, going out and partying and having drinks and eating out all the time because I couldn't cook. Probably still can't cook that well, but I was able to control some of those bills. I think the day after I left that job,
Mm-hmm.
I decided that before I dive headfirst into my own gig here, I need to like take some time to reset. So I decided I was going to give myself 2 weeks. You get your own 2 week notice. I never really had that before because from the day I turned 14 years old, I got a job. That was 14 years old,
Yeah.
legal working age in New Jersey. My birthday's in the middle of the summer. I got a job that day. My day of my birthday, I started working. Every summer, I worked 7 days a week. I just took multiple jobs. I was always interested in that.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I had a job, then I had my website stuff that I was doing. When I went to college, it was college and it was web design. As soon as I finished college, I mean, my next day was in the city. It wasn't a gap. It was
Mm-hmm.
right in New York City. My first couple of years in New York City, I was still lifeguarding over the summers. So the days I wasn't driving in a train to New York, I was sitting in the sun all day, which is, I mean, sounds probably a lot nicer
Yeah.
than I'm making it out to be, but it beats you up, right? And so I never had time to just kind of stop and like reset. And so I took the next 2 weeks off and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do anything. I sat in my house. The blinds were probably closed every day. I'm not really sure. I don't remember. It's a blur to me. And I watched all, however many, I think 10 seasons of the TV show Lost, hour long episodes. I watched every episode, which I told a buddy of mine who tried to get me to watch years ago. And the level of floored that he was when he realized I watched the entire series in 2 weeks was just his mind was completely blown out of proportion. It's like, how did you even have the time? Because I literally woke up and I turned it on and I left it on and I binged it until I fell asleep every night for about 2 weeks. It
Crazy.
was like a complete reset for me, which I think put me in a really good headspace to
Mm-hmm.
kind of charge forward with my business. I knew that I was going to have to seek out work, but I knew that I had enough side jobs to hold me afloat immediately. But I think those fears, I think I felt a little bit invincible once my old company sort of gave me that olive branch a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of pushed those fears aside or at least masked them long enough for me to kind of sit down, refocus, and ready to go. And I got to tell you, in doing that and coming in with a clear head, I think that's really what allowed me to really dive in and start figuring out, like, well, now I've got all these extra hours in my day that I have not had really ever at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the struggle of trying to find jobs previously, which was really taxing, is kind of gone now because I already spent, let's say, 5, 6 hours a day building out code for all these other projects. And the other 10 hours of my day was spent commuting or working for somebody else that I couldn't focus on that. Well, even if I took half of those extra hours and put it towards my own business,
Mm-hmm.
I can find new business. Wasn't always the best business. Sometimes they're, again, cheaper clients that come along and you don't make a ton of money on it. But I was able to connect with people and I was able to connect
Mm-hmm.
with people at a time that they're working, which also upped the quality of the client that I was getting too, because I'm talking to somebody during US business hours now, not at like, 9 o'clock at night on a Friday night, sending a cold email out
Yeah.
to somebody. The person that's responding back is also somebody that's doing this as a side hustle with not enough
Mm-hmm.
cash to really invest in it. So that jump, mortifying, that break, refreshing. But I think that realization that I can do this was super empowering because it ended up being, and I'm not suggesting this is always the case, but it ended up being a lot easier to get traction than I could have ever imagined. So
Mm-hmm.
those fears quelled pretty quickly.
When you mentioned this break between the
Mhm.
job and your individual business, like two
Yeah.
weeks that you binged watched the whole Lost series, I can imagine for people of for a guy like you with all this drive to work day after day, it's kind of difficult to hit the break literally and do nothing.
Hmm.
How was it for you?
I mean, that should tell you what my mind state was at that point. It was burnt out. Um, I always lean back on the commute. I loved the job I worked with in New York City. I loved
Mm-hmm.
the people. The camaraderie in there was awesome. We went to Yankee games all the time. We talked about football. I always tell a story that I went to the Giants Patriots football Super Bowl back in
Mhm.
2011 2012 season, the second time that they had battled each other. And at that time, I really didn't have the money to go to the Super Bowl. And my boss, because my buddy of mine called, he's like, listen, he's like, because we were going to try to go to some of the other games. And when I went to the first playoff game, they dominated. We were talking about going to the other games in San Francisco and Green Bay, which it was complicated. So we never went.
Yeah.
So my buddy calls me and we're walking down the street with my boss and another coworker of mine. And my buddy's like, listen, tickets are going to be $7,500 each, all inclusive. He's like, I'll put it on my credit card right now. You pay me whenever you have the money for it. And I'm like, I just don't know that I have it. And my boss looks at me and says, listen, don't worry about the days off. He's like, if you can somehow scrounge the money together and think this isn't going to kill you financially, do it. Do it. And he convinced me to do it. And you know what? I did it. I listened to him. I went to the Super Bowl. Giants ended up winning the Super Bowl. Where our office was is right on Broadway, which is where the parade comes through. So
Hmm.
my first day back in the office is the day of the parade. I walk back in, and my boss's corner office that's on Broadway with
Yeah.
windows all over the place is open. He walks out into the conference room. He's like, my office is yours today and the rest of the staff's. And there's garbage bags full of shredded paper for us to dump out the window as confetti. Was what I was walking away from. Like the camaraderie in that office was incredible. Like
Yeah.
he didn't need to do anything. I mean, he basically gave me 4 or 5 days off at this point to go to a Super Bowl and do not think about work once. He didn't charge me the days and he didn't care. You want to take time off to come off. And so, that weighed on me a lot is that I was kind of losing that a little bit too because now you're home
Hmm.
by yourself and you're you're not talking to anybody now and just kind of talking to yourself. But again, that commute it was exhausting every single day. The workload on both sides was exhausting, and I knew that like I couldn't I could dive right back into the work because that's what I'm really good at, right? Picking myself up and going. But I knew that if I once I started, I wasn't going to be able to kind of back off because now I'm
Hmm.
pushing the throttle fully down. And at the time, I'd mentioned I'd hired a freelancer and he was working for me pretty consistently. Well, of course, I'm telling him now that like I'm doing this. So I'm telling now somebody else that's going to now rely on me to also get more money because I want to make sure he's available. If I start picking a business,
Hmm.
I can't do it all myself. I want him to help too because then I can scale it faster. And so I think I would have felt a level of guilt if I had started and sort of puttered along. And so honestly, I didn't expect it to be as long as it was. I thought I was going to sit down for a day or two, and it ended up being just short shy of 2 weeks of just mindlessness and just doing nothing. And once I realized that it was happening, I'm like, you know what? That's fine. Like I'm not stressing about it. I'm just going to let it go and just kind of clear it all out of my system. But
Hmm.
I'm gonna say it was just honestly probably just being burnt out and then having that opportunity to have no obligation, which is, I mean, especially today's day, it's unheard of. Like there's never a time you have.
Yeah.
So
How did this attitude from your boss, from your mentor, affect your approach to your business today?
that's a great question. I've been in a fortunate situation for most of my jobs throughout my life. I probably had four really serious-ish jobs, and I use that term kind of loosely because one of them was at a supermarket as a teen. One of them's at a bank, kind of towards the end of my high school career. And those jobs I worked at for 2 years. It wasn't like a
Hmm.
one-time summer fling. I've always had really good bosses. Two in particular was in this company that I just left in New York, and then one was actually my summer seasonal job. The manager there was kind of a figment in the community, and his name was Pat, and my boss in New York was named Tom. Pat and Tom were very similar, both in stature, both in mannerisms, but also both in the way they kind of looked at their employees.
Hmm.
When I started working in the Summer Beach community, again, I started working at 14 years old. I also started volunteering there when I was 6 years old at every event. Picnics when I'd put burgers on buns and hand them out, work days when we clean up the community. My father did it. I would tag along with him and do it. So I was entrenched in the community, and Pat always saw my work ethic to the point where when I got of age, he pretty much forced me to become a lifeguard. Couldn't swim worth a damn, but he made sure that he kept pushing me through it, made me do all the training, afforded me every opportunity to become a lifeguard, which I ended up lifeguarding for about 10 years, lieutenant of staff. I'm still a part of that community. I'm actually now the vice president of the board of that community now. Tom was the same way, where when I came into that job, he could have easily said, we're going to hire somebody else ahead of you and you're just going to work for them. It's just going to be a holding period. He's like, you know what?
Hmm.
We got you in here. You're out of college. Looks like you have this experience anyway. I'm just going to give you the opportunity and run with it. And throughout my tenure with him, he gave me other opportunities. Webcasting, for example. We launched a weekly webcast series in 2007. Nobody was doing that, especially in the finance.
Mm-hmm.
I was mortified to get on a microphone and talk every single week to a bunch of strangers, let alone be
Yeah.
on camera. We weren't on camera that often, but it was mortifying. And it's funny because you can hear my voice in those early webcasts where I'm talking and it's hello everyone, this is Shane, and I'm so nervous to speak. Um, but he's like, just try it, just do it. And both
Yes.
of them were always very empowering. Um, what I took away from that is this belief in your employees, and it's kind of shaped my way of how I try to run my business too. It is really easy to go out there and find a new employee and hire them because their resume looks better and they say that they got better things and their qualifications are so much better. But it's really difficult to get that person up to speed and to make sure they jive with your business.
Mm-hmm.
So what I found is I look for people with work ethic. I can find anybody that can study. I can find anybody that can read up on something or learn something or figure out how to use Google to get the answer. What I can't find, what I can't teach is a work ethic. And so to this day, I mean, I've had employees come to me with quite literally no tangible skills within my industry. They've come as virtual assistants, data copiers, copy paste people, and they've become an integral fixture in my agency because they like to work hard. It creates
Mm-hmm.
this sense of loyalty, but you also empower them a little bit. And it's funny because we just started doing, which I guess I should have done forever. Word to everyone out there as an entrepreneur, but we started doing like sort of employee feedback type pieces. And a lot of my feedback is, them coming back like, oh, I'm mortified at what you're going to say. I'm going to get killed. I'm like, no, like I don't care about I care about the quality of work, of course. I care more that you're putting in your best effort and you're trying and you're actively seeking out answers and trying to learn. I care
Mm-hmm.
more about your potential than what you come here and you already know because things change fast, especially in my industry. It's technology. Today it's this, tomorrow it's
Yeah.
something else. If you know how to learn, you can go really far. And that's what I picked up from those bosses is just those two in particular. Again, my other ones in between were excellent and they were really good with people. But those are the two pieces is it's a better investment in cost and in time to invest in the people that are already loyal to you. Number one, it creates more loyalty. They don't want to leave because they like you and they believe in your mission. I've had people literally leave my company, come back and say, I'm willing to take less money because I believe in the way we work here versus being a cog in a wheel somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the most incredible things to possibly hear. But I'd rather I have continuing education opportunities available for everybody in my organization. If you want to learn something else, here you go. We've got a lot with Google certificates. I forgot what the name of that the program is.
Yeah.
They gave us a grant maybe a couple of years ago. So it's open to anybody that joins. You could be in my organization for one day. You take a grant program. I don't care. And if you leave, take it with you. Keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I've got other people that take certificate programs through Microsoft or Google or wherever else, and they save. As long as you take it and you pass it, here you go. I'll pay for the first time.
Yeah.
If you fail it because you're not trying, something different. If you almost pass it, I'll pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd rather spend the money on those people and let them grow and risk the fact that they might go somewhere else with that skill set, but trust the fact that I'm breeding a better environment for them with that camaraderie. I'm breeding an environment that's going to make them want to sit on a train for 5 hours a day because they enjoy the banter back and forth that we have. And trust me, I'm never building an office, so it's always going to be distributed workforce. At least I hope. But yeah, those are probably the two biggest life lessons I think I pulled from there. Is just invest in the people that work for you, invest in the people that
Mm-hmm.
believe in you, and honestly, just treat the people that work with you the right way. Just be nice, be kind, and I
Yeah.
think that goes really far.
Well, that really sounds incredible. You building up such an amount of positive energy around you that's it's almost overwhelming to be honest. I want to ask one question about your employees.
Mhm.
You said that their skills do not really matter to you because you can teach the skills. What does then matter? You already mentioned the hard work. Are there any other aspects that you consider when you take somebody new on board?
Of course. So, I mean, I guess saying skills don't matter at all is a little facetious, right? When I'm
Yeah.
hiring for a developer role, I can't get somebody that's never done development work.
Hmm.
Having said that, And I will use a perfect example recently. I recently hired a junior developer to come into my organization. We're a very WordPress driven organization. That's pretty much the crutch of what we do. He happens to have coding skills, but not WordPress skills. WordPress skills don't matter. You know how to code, I can teach you WordPress. It's easy. But his background is in engineering. And
Mm-hmm.
just talking to him and understanding what his values are and what drives him, I sort of can pick out the way he thinks and the way he approaches problems. I look at his background, which is in engineering, knowing that, like, all right, well, he's going to think of problems a little more outside of the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Engineers have a way to break down processes. Just my experience working with them, not always the case. So that's somebody that I'll grab and I try to mold him into what I need him to be. His skill set out of the gate is minimal, but the progress that he's made in about 2 months is better than people that we've had on staff for significantly longer that had significantly more experience because he's got a willingness to learn. Um, in other in other examples, I had one guy that worked for me. He was from Latin America, so he comes in, super low price from a freelancing website, and he was coming in to basically do data entry, quite literally copying and pasting data. And I start talking to him, and his background, has a degree in law. You have a law degree, and you're copying and pasting for me right now. Well, it turns out that in his country, a lawyer makes nothing. Some of the political climate down there, some of the economic climate, just whatever the situation might be, he made nothing. So he made more money working for me for effectively peanuts, copying and pasting. Well, so I'm like, do you mind if I try to give you some different responsibilities? And 2.5 years later, he's now since emigrated to the United States and he's left our company and gotten a better job. But before he left, I mean, he took over my entire SEO division, my marketing division, and he was running like my whole client side of the business, interfacing with clients every day. It's a job he wasn't remotely qualified for in the beginning, but the guy practiced law. He went to school and he didn't even use a law degree whatsoever. But he was willing enough, or he knew how to learn, right? And he knew how to just adapt. And he was willing enough to learn these new skills that really had nothing to do with his education, but intrigued him. And I'm not saying a formal education is always the way either. I taught myself how to code. When I went to college, it was nothing for me. I used my high school notes to finish my college classes because I kept them all. In my high school
Mm-hmm.
classes, I blitzed through the classes because I knew it. I enjoyed the stuff. So I did it all the time. I believe in people that learn on their own. Um, and that's generally what I try to find when I'm talking to people is, what's your work ethic like and what do you have to work for? Um, a lot of the times, this, I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know if maybe I'm just starting to get old or not, but I've talked to a lot of kids that come in and there's almost a sense of entitlement now, right? Where you do X, Y, and Z, and you're expected to get this, and that, right? Whether it's salary, whether it's benefits,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a specific work set, work hours. We live in a different world now. We live in a very distributed workforce. People work whenever they want. A lot of people work from home. There's a lot of trust involved in that. And so I always tell my employees, like, you don't have hours. We work by projects. As long as you get your work done, I don't care. You work 9 to 5. You can work
Mm-hmm.
10 to 2. You can work nine to 1, and then maybe work from, like, 11 to midnight. Doesn't matter to me. Just get the work done. Um, you'll get people that will fixate themselves on those hours, and if they're doing nothing in those hours, they just call it quits after the end of the day, and they won't make up the time any other time. They'll stop hard. It's fine. You're entitled to do that. Then you get people that will work a little bit in the morning and they take off the middle of the day and they'll come back late at night and say, "Oh, I'm gonna catch up on all this stuff," and then they'll throw on a weekend. They'll throw on a Sunday. I'm not recommending to anybody to overwork yourself because I've done that and it's not good for you, especially as you try to get older and create a family. But you can see that the job means something to them. They have something to
Mm-hmm.
lose. And those are the people I like. I like the people that don't necessarily come from a background where they've always gotten things handed to them, where everything's always been easy for them, where they've never had to sort of face adversity. I like people that have kind of crawled out of the depths and made something for themselves. I like people that have experienced failure and to see how they come back from that. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what molds somebody that, at least for my agency, is valuable to me. If you know how to battle adversity, it means that when things get crazy in your job, you're going to figure it out. That could be you're building a program and it's not working. Well, there's a thing called Google. Go out and use it. And you'd be shocked at how many people in technology do not use Google to troubleshoot their problems. I use it all the time. I took 6 different programming languages at colleges. I still have to use
Mm-hmm.
Google. You can't remember everything. You can't retain it all. But there's a lot of people that don't know how to do that. They don't know how to find answers. And so for me, that's always been it. Is I can tell pretty quickly if somebody's going to be, I don't want to say smart enough because that's the right word, but like a street smart, savvy enough is maybe the right word, but
Mm-hmm.
savvy enough to figure out a solution to something. You can't learn if you don't ask questions. And I think people are very nervous to do that because I feel like they think it shows weakness. And I sure, maybe to a degree, but if you're there's always a quote, I want to say, I think Mark Cuban said it on Shark Tank once and he borrowed it from somebody else, but if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And it's
Mm-hmm.
always stuck with me because I like that about people. I like when people learn from each other. And it's the same with me is when I bring somebody on, I want them to tell me. I always ask for feedback from my employees too. Like if I'm telling you to do something and you think I'm crazy, tell me why. Because otherwise I'm going to keep asking you to do it. But I like that. I like those people that just kind of sink their teeth into something and figure out a solution to a problem.
How exactly do you figure it out in a job interview? Because people can tell you anything,
They
right?
can tell you anything. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect science. It's a lot about gosh, I don't want to use this word. I hate this word. It's all over like every dating show, but sometimes it's about how you vibe with people. And
Hmm.
don't ever reuse that word again. But you create synergy with people. How is
Yeah.
conversation? Do their answers feel very dry? And sometimes that's a matter of um, you're just nervous in an interview. I mean, growing up, I was a very shy person. I didn't talk. I would never look somebody in the eyes. I would never talk to them. I would always look down. Like I was very nervous. So I understand. I can
Hmm.
empathize with that. Like somebody doesn't feel comfortable in that situation. So a lot of the times when I'm interviewing people, I can figure out what you know technology wise. And honestly, I don't really care too much about the semantics of it. Because, like I said, if you know how to Google something, you can figure out the answer. It doesn't matter. So I'll try to have more one on one conversations. Some of my interview questions, either within the initial application or as like my follow up questions, are always, what do you do outside of this? What are your hobbies? Tell me about the things you do. You'd
Hmm.
be surprised how many people play music or are into aviation and they have these like really analytical thinking brains because those are really nuanced skills to have, right? People that are in military or part of some sort of a team, like a sports team, they're going to fall in line a lot better. They're going to know how to work with a team. They're going to know how to take instruction because they're so used to being coached or drilled or along the lines. I like to know what people's obligations are. I always ask, share if you want. You don't have to. It's totally personal. What are your obligations outside this job? Again, this is a remote job.
Hmm.
I get it. If you have another job, just let me know. I get it. If you have a family, are you studying? What do you have there? Do you have a family? What are those? I ask questions about that. I like to see where people's values lie and what they bring up when they talk. Sometimes people are very personal, and that's fine. And I'm not going to push in that regard. I try to find other things, try to identify what some of those interests are. But just in the way somebody puts effort forth in those question and answer periods is usually a good indicator to me whether or not they're the right fit. I've had
Hmm.
plenty of people where on paper they are an all-star. But then like the applications, you ask them a question like blah, 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 blah. And the answer it's like a one-word answer. Yes, yes, yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, no problem. I don't like yes people. I want people to tell me what their weaknesses are. Tell me how to
Hmm.
correct them. I want people to give me some context. Yeah, I can do that, but or no, I'm not great at this, but I have confidence that I can learn it. Like elaborate on your answers, put thought into it,
Hmm.
show care. I think the effort you put forth, even in a piece of text, when you're filling out an application, if you show effort, at least to me, in that, it means you're going to show effort in everything else you do. If you just fill it out and you're quick and it's the one word answers, I get it when you're applying for jobs, especially you're filling out 100,000 applications, it gets tiring, it gets exhausting. But what you're telling me is it's not worth the effort. And so I try to pick up on those types of things. I think I have a halfway decent track record. I'm not always perfect. Some people do. They talk a great game and then they can't really follow through with it.
Hmm.
It is what it is. I try not to burn bridges either, so I always try to see if we can find a common ground, talk about it a little bit, and sometimes go our separate ways. But for the most part, it's honestly just about how you connect with people and just that initial conversation outside of the job. That's where I think it becomes important.
Yeah. Speaking about putting effort in, and especially in your area of technology,
Mhm.
how do you deal with, or how do you confront this new technology of artificial intelligence? Do you apply it at all, or do you use it only in certain areas?
You were throwing a curveball question at me today, huh? So AI is interesting because AI, as we know it, is actually not really artificial intelligence. It's more like machine
Mm-hmm.
learning, right? All that Chat GPT is, or Google's Gemini now is Bard, Copilot. All it is taking a bunch of data and training these models on that data. It's not coming up with its own thoughts. And I think that's an important distinction because it should quell the fears of people that are in technology. When I started coding, everything was in HTML. I opened up a
Mm-hmm.
notepad file and I typed it all out. I learned how to code by going to a website, right clicking, clicking view source, copying the whole website code, pasting in a notepad file, and changing things. That's how I figured it out. Change this, it does that. Change this, it does that.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It was simple. And that's how you were able to do it. You could try to do that now. Most of your websites aren't going to work the same way because now there's different files that are all in there. They're doing like server-side execution on the files. A lot of the content doesn't actually exist as a page, built in databases now. It's changed quite a bit. When I discovered Dreamweaver was my first editing software, which allowed me to template websites out and make wholesale changes to multiple pages. Still was a little more convoluted because you had to update all the pages at once, but it made
Mm-hmm.
that process a little bit easier. Then all of a sudden, flash forward, Wix comes out and Squarespace, and we can make a website for $100. Well, I'm charging at that point maybe $1,000 or $2,000 a website. They're coming out with $100 website. It's going to put me out of business. Still in business. I think with any new technology, and you can ask the people that back in the day when phones are started coming out, and all of a sudden they went to cell
Mm-hmm.
phones and with cable and the streaming era technology, you have to learn to adapt to it, and you have to learn how it augments your existing process. For us, we can take code and we can dump it into Chat GPT and it can find errors for us. It's not going to write
Mm-hmm.
code very well, though. We've tried to do that. It doesn't work that well. It's not there yet. If it can find something on the internet, and the internet is vast, it'll help you fix syntax, ease the process. For imagery, if you're looking for stock photos, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you can use like Dolly or you can use Midjourney and you can get really cool photos.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't get what you want. You see people saying, "Oh, I created this logo on Chat GPT, whatever." It's great. But if you send that logo to a client, they want to change to it. How are you going to make that change? You ain't going
Mm-hmm.
back into Chat GPT because you can put the exact same prompt in 1,000 times and you're getting 1,000 different options.
Yeah.
It's not there yet where it's modifying and editing or sending out layered files. You need a designer for that. So what we've been doing is we've tried to use it to augment a lot of what we do to make our process faster so we can focus on some other stuff. I don't care about using automation tools or AI tools or frameworks that make my websites come out faster. As long as the
Mm-hmm.
code is clean, as long as the client is satisfied with the product and we're giving them an elevated step over an out of the box page builder, I'm fine with using that stuff. Because if I can get that done faster, it means I can get another project on the pipeline. I think eventually AI will not replace a lot of roles, but will continue to take out those low tier things. The
Mm-hmm.
junior developers, they're going to get wiped out because AI will fix up all that stuff on the web development side. Your elementary graphic designers, they'll probably get knocked out. A lot of your copywriters are starting to get bumped. Now, instead of a copywriter, you're going to become an editor, though. Instead of a junior designer, you might just be an AI prompter where you're going in and you're learning how to prompt AI to create the code you want. That's a whole nother experience in and of itself. People don't realize that you can't just type into a chat, "I want a website," and it pops up the exact website. It can't read your mind. You have to teach it and you have to curate it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a lot of hurdles that have to happen. If you want something that you don't care what the output is, AI is great. But as soon as you start to customize that, that's when people come into play there. Um, it's adapt or die, honestly. You've seen it happen with how many companies around the world that Amazon comes in and retail disappears. Retail had the leg up all along. They had warehouses everywhere in the country because they had storefronts. If they just shipped out of those, Amazon was killed immediately, and they didn't change. And a lot of them fell by the wayside. Now Walmart does it, Target does it, they ship right out of their stores. Why don't we do that 20 years ago? Amazon wouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the same way with all technologies. From the day I started web design, there's been a web design killer, a web designer killer, always around the corner. Every year, you got something else out there that's going to get rid of my job. And at some point, that's probably true. I think it'll be more likely that websites will go away before web designers are irrelevant. I think you'll see social media, kind of like you see Facebook pages already. Some companies don't even have a website. They have a Facebook page and that's it, or an Instagram page, and they sell right off of there. I think that will be more of a trend than
Hmm.
anything else than a formal website. Um, just adapt. But I'm fascinated by it as a technologist and somebody that's just into the industry. It captivates me to see how that's coming along and honestly see where the future is. So I'm excited to keep using it as much as we can. And honestly, nobody really likes staring at the computer for 10 hours a day making code. As much as like we enjoy the passion of it, we enjoy the end result. And if there's ways to
Hmm.
make that faster and easier, I'm all for it because then I can get the same results in a quarter of the time.
I think if we go really through to this rabbit hole of AI and social media, it take us a couple hours. I think that's why I think it's around time where we can round it up. And I have a question for you
Sure.
from a previous guest.
Sure.
He asked, "How do you continue to stay motivated in your business?"
Motivation is hard because when you're at the top of the food chain, everything falls on your lap. There are going to be days that you don't want to work. And there are going to be days where you can't stop working. There's going to be days where everybody hates you and they're pissed, and you ask yourself why you're doing this. And there's going to be days where this is the greatest job in the world. For me, and I can only speak for me, I've always had a passion with computers. I've always had a passion for figuring things out. And I have a passion for helping other people. In not to sound cheesy, but in that sense too, is when I was graduating college, I had an opportunity to go work for AT&T, or I had an opportunity to go work for the Market Technicians Association. AT&T paid better. It was way closer to home, and it was more directly correlated to my bachelor's degree, which was in computer programming. The only reason I took computer programming was to learn the intricacies of computers. I chose the Market Technicians Association because it had nothing to do with computers. It's going to be a web developer there, but I wasn't going to be sitting behind a cubicle staring at code all day long. And so for me, it was a conscious effort to not put myself in a situation that I wasn't going to enjoy what I was doing. You have to enjoy it. You can't be a business owner without enjoying what you're doing because there will be really, really long days. Once you get in that flow, for me, I get to work with a lot of new businesses all the time. I work with small businesses. I get to talk to people that are motivated, that have dreams, and that are brilliant in their respective industry. And that to me is a motivating factor. I had a call last week with a guy that we started up a contract with literally on Monday. Oh, today's Monday. Today, he sent over his contract over. Everything's ready to go. We're rolling now, and he's got this really great idea. And it just in talking to him, I had 3 or 4 phone calls with him, and typically I won't do that, especially before we've signed any dotted lines, because we're sharing a lot of ideas back and forth. But I always tell people I'm captivated by talking about technology. I love it. And it's just helping him realize that dream. I've worked with nonprofit organizations. I've worked with mom and pop shops. I've had, local landscapers call me and say, you need to shut off my web forms. I'm getting so much business. I don't even know what to do with it. You explode their businesses and they get so successful. And like a part of that is them. Another part of that is you because you helped them get there. And for me, that's always been a really big motivating factor.
Hmm.
Burnout happens all the time. When you feel like you're going to burn out, push the computer back or whatever your job is, shut the door and just walk away. Take a breath, just kind of reassess yourself. Figure out something else in your life that isn't built around your business. Start to set boundaries. I told you before that I worked in New York City. I'd come home. I was working all night. I mean, I had an instance when I had a client call me in my mid-20s. I'm out at a bar on a Saturday night at 1 o'clock in the morning, and she's calling me, texting me, Facebook messaging me, whatever to get a hold of me. And I finally answer the phone, like, what do you want? Well, you're usually up working at this hour. Like, yeah, maybe in like the dead of winter, but not in the middle of summer. Like I'm out drinking. Like, what are you doing? But it was like a light bulb moment for me because I realized that like I set these unrealistic boundaries with my clients who think that I'm always accessible now.
Hmm.
I've since, and this is going back to the 4 hour work week too, which I knew at the time, these are the times that I'm available. I'm not responding outside of those times. And of course, I'm working late at night every night. It's my business, but I'm not responding to emails. I'm scheduling the emails for the next day. So that way, when a client emails me, they're not expecting a response at 10 o'clock at night on a Tuesday or a Friday or Saturday night. That email's coming on a Monday morning at 8 a.m. or Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., whatever. That way I can distance myself when I want to and I'm not getting bombarded all the time. And then I can find something else. I've got 2 young kids. Spending time with them and my wife is a huge part of my life and is a great way for me to just disconnect. I'll sometimes walk away from my desk. Kids get home from school. I'll shut the computer off. I won't come back down here all night. I won't even think. I'll be in the middle of a project. No, I'm burnt out today. I'm just walking away. And you have to find a way, without, of course, doing it all the time and making the business suffer, to separate your personal life away from your business to some degree. It is not always going to be easy because this is your business. You're putting in a lot of hours into it. You have to make it survive, but you have to find something else that you can latch onto. Maybe get a pet if you're into that. I've got a fish tank. I've got dogs. There's activities for me to do. I love the New York Giants, professional NFL football. I love pro wrestling. So I try to go to events go to concerts, like do something, build something into your schedule to just reset yourself. I play video games. I want to say every night, but that's probably not true, but several times a week, maybe an hour or two a night. The video games is not because I'm doing it to be a streamer or anything like that. I'm playing it to reset. I play dumb games that are just like just clear my mind type stuff. I watch a lot of TV shows, but I try not to watch shows that are super serious. So I'll watch something that just like dispels me. You need to clear your head as much as possible and not let your job overtake your life to that degree. And if you reach a point where you're not enjoying it, it's time to walk away. Find something else to do, whether it's another job, another company. Find ways to maybe downsize the amount of work you're doing by hiring somebody else, and realize that like a lot of people, and this is kind of going a little bit off topic, but I think it's worth mentioning. A lot of people, when they hire somebody, they try to hire what that person's worth. And I think it's a terrible way to hire. I think it's better to hire what your time is worth. Here's why I say that. If I hire this guy at $10 an hour, right? I'm paying him $10 an hour and I still have to do that job. Well, if I'm valuing my time at $100 an hour, it means for every hour that I'm compensating him, I'm losing $90 an hour. Okay. Now, if I hire that guy, or maybe that guy or a different guy at $25 an hour or at $50 an hour, yeah, it's a huge markup. But if that person can take that job off of my desk completely, I just made an extra $50 an hour. So yes, they're getting more money, but you're getting your time. And I think that's important in trying to figure out your business, because you can buy anything in business. You can't buy your time back, right? And so if all of your time is always going in your business because you're afraid to let somebody else run with it, then you're always going to be in faster. You're not going to be able to take those opportunities, take those breaks, and give yourself those mental refreshes. So again, a little off topic, but I wanted to kind of bring it back into that a little bit. You just got to find time to relax and just break away. Otherwise, just move on. It's simple as that. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
It's always going to be taxing, but
Thank you. What would be your question for my next guest?
oh man, you really put me on the spot today. My question to your next guest, it would kind of lean into something that means a lot to me, and it kind of leans into failure and adversity. And you and I have talked about this kind of off screen a little bit too. Is I had a story about going into a meeting where I completely and utterly bombed. I bombed, and I was profusely sweating sitting on the call because I was so nervous in it. Um, that taught me a lot about myself. And so I would position that question to your next guest is, in what way or what was the situation where you completely failed in anything? It could be in your business, it could be in life. And what did you learn from that? How did that make you better? I think that kind of self-reflection is important, especially as a business owner, because you can tell everybody else how they're doing their job wrong, but they're always going to be mortified to tell you because they don't want to lose their job. They don't understand that, right? I like to have an open relationship with my employees, but they're not going to. Oh, well, some of them will, because some of them have been with me long enough where they know they can say whatever they want to me. But others are going to feel fearful that I'm going to retaliate and try to get rid of them. Not the case. And there's really nobody above you to tell you when you're not doing something right. So it's important to really notice what your flaws are. And so that's what I would position out is, what are your failures? Whether it's a situation, whether it's a tendency, a habit, whatever it might be, what are they? Recognize them. And what did you learn from it? How can you improve from it?
Thank you so much.
Of
Thank you so
course.
much for the whole hour, and I
Of
wish you
course.
a great day.
Likewise. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.